Welcome to Tokyo Game Life, a Tokyo-based video game podcast focusing on Nintendo and gaming culture in Japan's capital. Your host Mono here. Recently, I guest appeared on another podcast, and the host said that Tokyo Game Life is a slice of gaming life in Tokyo, which honestly is a much better tagline than what I've been saying. He said I could steal it, so I just might. Outside of thievery, there's a lot going on in Tokyo. Golden Week is almost upon us. If you don't know, think of it like a big spring break holiday in Japan. It's a popular time to travel, but hotel prices are jacked up during this period, so a lot of people just skip out and relax at home. And if your home is Tokyo, it's not a bad place to lounge around for a few days. You can do anything in Tokyo, so you can still live it up without traveling. And we're living it up this episode. In this episode's feature, we're going older than old school. Before the SNES, before the NES, even before Nintendo. This episode's feature is all about Hanafuda, traditional Japanese playing cards and the games associated with it like Koi Koi. You probably know that once upon a time, Nintendo didn't make video games, but instead started off manufacturing Hanafuda cards. Even today, there are Nintendo licensed Hanafuda cards you can buy at stores. And because I sadly don't know everything yet, I've brought in an expert to talk all about it. Hanafuda expert and YouTuber Omitsu joins me to chat all about Hanafuda and how to become a Koi Koi master. So sit back and break out the Tsukimizake. That's a Hanafuda reference. You'll understand it shortly. I am going to chat about games that came out in the 21st century too. Keeping in with the Hanafuda theme, I've decided to rank all 51 games in Clubhouse Games for Nintendo Switch. Koi Koi is in there, but will it claim first place? What's the worst game? What's the 32nd best game? You gotta listen to find out. I'm also nearing the end of Elden Ring, which really could use some sort of card minigame. I covered my initial impressions a few episodes back, but now I want to give some final thoughts on From's biggest game yet. And in the news, there's some Switch game announcements to be excited about. But let's start off with our feature on Hanafuda with special guest Omitsu. This episode's feature is all about Hanafuda, traditional Japanese playing cards. It was Nintendo's first major business, so there is absolutely a straight line from this to the Nintendo Switch. Instead of just a history lesson on the subject, I wanted to bring in someone who is very passionate about sharing Hanafuda with others. So guest, please introduce yourself.
Hi there, my name is Omitsu. I have a YouTube channels. One is for Hanafuda. The another is for talking about my experiences and thoughts. One of my goals is to play Hanafuda all over the world to share this beautiful culture, make friends, and make peace.
Thank you for joining me today. So Omitsu, how did you discover Hanafuda?
When I was a preschooler, my neighbor's couple took care of me on weekends. One day, when I was hanging out in their place, I found the little box with that tank face on it. Actually, it was Nintendo's Hanafuda in their drawer. But they told me it's nothing. It's just cards. It's too early for you to play this. And they didn't teach me what it was. But few years later, I still remember these little books and asked them what it was. They didn't want to tell me at first, but I was persistent. So they finally told me Omitsu, this is Hanafuda da yo. If you really want to play, you have to keep a secret. You cannot tell anyone. If you tell your friends or your family, they might not let us hanging up anymore. As you may know, Hanafuda was once banned by the government a long time ago. So some people, especially grandpa generation, so still think playing Hanafuda is not a public thing to do. Older generations still judge tattoo in Japan. It's like that. But I started playing Hanafuda with them. We love playing Hanafuda, so we played it every weekend when I was with them until they moved away. After that, I started to play Hanafuda by myself on my cell phone. But I had to keep this promise until I start the YouTube channel. So
Mhm.
nobody knows that I play Hanafuda. All my friends didn't know. My family didn't know. This neighbor couple knows that I start Hanafuda on my YouTube. They were like, oh my goodness, something like that.
Is Hanafuda still popular in Japan today?
It's not too popular like other Nintendo games. Even among card games, Hanafuda is not so popular. We Japanese play cards at parties like Daifugo, Babaneki, Shinarabe, or Uno. Yeah, but we don't usually play Hanafuda at social gatherings, at least in my area. Before I started YouTube, I've never talked about Hanafuda in my whole life because, like I told you earlier, I believed I should not. But at the same time, I've never met anyone talk about Hanafuda.
Hmm.
If someone talk about in front of me, I might wanna be a secret Hanafuda friend.
Yes.
Yeah, but it never happened, unfortunately. However, after I started my YouTube channel, I found out that some friends around me can play. Like they are saying like, "Oh, I play with my grandparents." Oh, yes, yes, I usually play with my family. So it's not too popular, but people still love it in their homes. And also, there are a lot of arts based on Hanafuda, so I want people to play more.
Hanafuda is the name of the cards, but there are actually many games associated with
Yeah.
Hanafuda. So, what type of Hanafuda games do you like to play?
Oh, I usually play Koi Koi,
Hmm.
and then Hanawase, and then Shishibo Chushin. So Koi Koi is one of the popular rules in Hanafuda, I think. You can play for two people, and then Hana Awase can play from two people. So we can play Hana Awase with three people, four people. And then, have you heard Shishibo Chushin before?
No, what is that?
It's really, really local rule. So this is my first Hanafuda rules that I learned from my neighbor's couple.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then it's really difficult to find someone who knows Shishibo Chushin.
Koi Koi seems to be the most popular game to play with Hanafuda cards. Why do you think Koi Koi is the most popular?
Oh, because Koi Koi is fun. Logic or calculation does not work here. Yeah, sometimes you can do it, but it's not always. So we cannot accept what's gonna happen until the end. And if you start playing it, you really wanna say Koi Koi to earn point more.
Does luck play a big part in Koi Koi?
Yes, it does. But you can draw luck if you play it right.
So, what are some Koi Koi strategies that we should know?
Oh, I have 5 points. Number one, like check your cards and people's cards and then think of what kind of hands I can make or they can make. And number two, make hands without letting notice. And number three, crush people's hands. Number four, decision making. And the last one is just have fun with any happening.
I think for many people, it's hard to find another person to play Koi Koi with. So, a lot of people play Hanafuda video games. Do you have any Hanafuda video game recommendations?
Oh yes, so I like the Hanafuda by Ambulance Corporation. This is the application that I use. I really love it because I wanna play Koi Koi and also I wanna play Hanaawase. You can choose Koi Koi or Hanaawase. And then also would like to play Nintendo DS. Yeah, I wanna buy one until the summer and then I wanna play Game Tizen.
So, do you have a favorite season or a favorite Hanafuda card?
Oh, it's a difficult question because I love every card because every
Hmm.
card is so beautiful. But yes, especially like Botan, Peony. Yeah, because my birthday is in June.
I really like the full moon card. It seems very
Oh,
Japanese.
yes, it is. Yes, actually, so when I was start my YouTube channel, I wanted to like symbol from Hanafuda. So that's why I make my own moon with papers, color papers.
So, in Koi Koi, there are many hands. Do you have a favorite hand, like Four Lights or Tsukimizake?
Of course, everything and especially five lights. But yeah, Inoshikacho is my favorite.
Is that the one with the different animals?
Oh yes, deer and then peony with butterfly and then like Pique.
The boar, I think.
Oh yes, yes.
I like Tsukimizake because it's the easiest, but also it's worth a lot of points.
Oh yeah, and then also if you have like with Sakura, it kind more big point.
Nintendo started off as a Hanafuda card maker. Do you own any Nintendo made Hanafuda cards? You mentioned earlier that you had some when you were a child.
Oh yes. If you check my Instagram, I secretly put one Hanafuda card on my one photo. I have been playing Hanafuda on my smartphone, but I found mine here in the Japanese market in Canada. I was so excited when I found one. Of course, it's the same Nintendo's Hanafuda cast that I played with neighbors couples.
Yes, I own a few Nintendo made ones. They still sell them in Tokyo. I have
Mhm,
like the normal one and, of course, the Mario themed ones.
mhm.
And there's another pattern that I'm not sure about, but it is made by Nintendo. So it is a lot of fun to see that even though they are a video game company, they still
Oh,
make or they still license Hanafuda cards.
mhm. Yeah, actually, yeah, I wanted to see that like your mother's Hanafuda cars.
Oh, yes. I'll definitely show them off very soon.
Yeah, please.
Thank you for chatting Hanafuda with me today, Omitsu. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Please put Omitsu Hanafuda. And recently, I've just been trying to play Hanafuda in English on my YouTube.
And listeners, I'll put all those links in the podcast description, so please check it out. Omitsu, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Once again, a special thanks to Omitsu for joining me. Be sure to follow her on Instagram and YouTube. I put the links in the podcast description. Now, let's talk games. Welcome back to the 21st century, back to 2022. And what's the hottest game of 2022? The one that everyone's talking about? That's right, Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics for Nintendo Switch. Known as Sekai no Asobi Taizen 51 in Japan, which basically means Worldwide Games Collection 51. Developed by Mario Party and Wii Party developers Indie Cube, this sequel to the DS breakout hit released in summer 2020. Indie Cube is actually based in Sapporo, but they were founded in Tokyo, so we've got that connection. I was a fan of the original DS game and was hoping for years that Nintendo would bring it back. It was announced out of nowhere in a Nintendo Direct Mini in early 2020, and of course, I bought it day one. It's an absolutely wonderful game, exactly what I wanted from a sequel, and I think it's a must have for any Switch owner. But this segment is not a review or impressions on the game. I want to rank all 51 titles. The piano doesn't count, sorry. This ranking is more related to how it's executed in the game. I mean, Real Fishing is probably better than Clubhouse Games fishing, right? Okay, enough preamble. Let's get to the ranking. I don't think spending 10 minutes talking just about Spider Solitaire is good podcast material, so I'll keep each game description a bit brief. 51, technically the worst game, but hey, something's gotta be at the bottom. I'm going to give it to Hare and Hounds. You are a rabbit and you are trying to avoid some dogs. I feel a big part of the game relies on the dogs messing up. Even playing as the hounds, it's not particularly fun. There should really be more spaces to move around. 50, 9 Men's Morris. A similar idea to Hare and Hounds in that you have a very limited space in which you can move. This is actually a solved game, meaning you can just straight up look up a strategy on how to win by moving specific pieces each turn. There's no dynamism to it. 49, Backgammon. I wish I had some clever breakdown on the flaws of this game, but it's simply boring. It bored me as a kid, and I thought, okay, as an adult, maybe I'll understand the nuances. Nope, still dull. 48, Ludo. This is an off-brand Sorry. I know many of us have fond memories playing Sorry as kids, but this game is even slower than Backgammon. Hindering opponents is fun, but there's just way too much needless back and forth. 47, Shooting Gallery. It's pretty fun for 2, but after that, there's really no reason to do it again. Not bad, but kind of dull on replays. I'm glad these more WePlay-esque titles are in here, but there are much better ones that are higher on the list. Coming in at 45 is Toy Boxing, a digital rock'em sock'em robots, but not as random. 44 is Darts. This is one of the motion-only games. Digital darts always feels a bit strange to me. For some reason, unlike other sports, you really need the tactile feeling of a dart in your hand to get the most out of it. 43 is Toy Tennis, which is a little clunky to control and has a higher skill ceiling. I could see some people getting really into it though. 42 is Slot Cars. Listen, we all know the best slot car game is in Yakuza 0, so this one didn't stand a chance. 41 is Sliding Puzzle, which is more of a video gamey type of game than most, and you need to adjust the route of a moving piece. It's pretty challenging, but a good mind-bender. Ending up at 40 is Toy Soccer, which is basically foosball. It doesn't jam like real foosball, so that's a major point in its favor. I like how retro all the toy games are. It really is a callback to Nintendo's toy-making portion of their history. Gone are the 40s. Let's get into the 30s. 39 is Klondike Solitaire. This is just, well, normal solitaire. I think if they just called it solitaire, we would all know the rules. I gotta give it to Microsoft though, they knew how to make the card spin out of control when you win. 38 is Spider Solitaire, which is solitaire but way cooler. It has a lot of variations you can try out, but it definitely takes some time to wrap your mind around if you've only played the normal, Klondike Solitaire. At lucky number 37 is 6-Ball Puzzle, which is really just a video game. You have a group of 3 balls that you need to match colors with, and then make them disappear off the board. It's no Tetris, but it scratches that retro puzzle game itch. 36 is Pig's Tail, which actually comes from Japan. This game is pure luck, but honestly, it's still pretty fun. I'm sure there's maybe some strategy to it, but it's just something you mindlessly play and relax. 35, Speed. Since you need to move a cursor instead of using your hands, it is a bit slower than you would like, but again, this is a very kid-friendly classic game that you can just turn off your brain and play. 34 is Checkers. This game is actually not that popular in Japan, despite it being one of the definitive board games in the West. Double threes. 33 is Dots and Boxes, where you take turns drawing lines to make a box. It's more strategic than you may think. And when you really get the upper hand on your opponent, you can draw something like 7 boxes in a row, which is a great feeling. 32, Dominoes. I always feel this game has some sort of secret rule that it never tells me, but there's a lot of diversity in what types of games you can play. 31 is Renegade, aka Othello, a classic strategy game, but my wife crushes me at it every single time. It's pretty popular in Japan, and I think a lot of people grow up playing it. At number 30 is Mahjong Solitaire. It really has nothing to do with the actual Mahjong outside of the tiles, and you just match the designs. It's certainly a classic genre in and of itself when it comes to retro Japanese arcade titles. Not sure if the version in Clubhouse Games matches with the best in that genre, but it's a nice inclusion. The 20s, we're winding down. 29 is Chinese checkers. Fun fact, nothing to do with China at all. It was actually invented in Germany, and Americans just called it Chinese for marketing purposes. A good game, though, it's one of those that gets better with more players. It can be a bit lengthy in real life, so having a digital version definitely speeds things up. 28 is Takoyaki. This is another heavily luck-based game where you flip over cards and just place them on your side. You're trying to get ace through 10 in a row by drawing them from the deck. Hey, sometimes you just want to see if luck is on your side. Plus, it has a fun Japanese name, so I'll throw it in this spot. 27 is War, the classic card game that also is just pure luck. Maybe there's some strategy to it in terms of card counting or predicting what your opponent has, but you really just want to see that big number top the small number. 26 is Mini Shogi. This is a much smaller version of Shogi, which can be summed up as Japanese chess. I thought it would be much easier to learn since it is smaller, but it's harder in a way since you only have a limited number of moves. It's a good entry point into the big boy though. Speaking of that, 25, Shogi. A traditional Japanese board game, Japanese chess, call it whatever you want. The rules are surprisingly similar to chess. Some of the pieces have the exact same functions, but there are some unique rules and gameplay elements that make them two very distinct games. Shogi has gold generals and silver generals, which move in different ways than any chess piece, so using them is a lot of fun. There are actually many Japan-exclusive Shogi games on Nintendo hardware. I might talk about it in the future. Starting with Shogi, we are officially in the top half of the games. Not that the games I talked about just now are bad, not at all. I like all of them except for maybe the bottom 3, but we're getting into the cream of the crop here. 24. What could top the strategy, the centuries-old allure that is Shogi? That's right, Team Tanks. This is based on the classic tank game on Wii Play, but this is the team version. This game is so simple, yet there's still a lot of room for strategy and reflexes. It's just great. 23 is Carom from India. Did you know that the US and Japanese versions of Clubhouse Games on DS were actually quite different? The Japanese version had many more Japan-focused games that weren't in the US version and vice versa. The US version actually got a re-release in Japan as an international edition, so I'm glad the Switch version has a lot of international games and parity across the world. I mean, a game is a game. People can learn how to play it no matter where they're from. Carom is kind of a mix of marbles and billiards. You have these discs that you try to knock into a hole. You can pull off a lot of fun trick shots just like in billiards, but it is less bouncy. 22 is toy curling, where you try to get a curling puck into the middle of the board. The ice board, is it a rink? It's pretty small. You've got to learn the physics of the puck to be able to get the upper hand on your opponent and try to knock their pieces out of the center. So you need to figure out not only how to place the puck in the middle, but also make some sort of protective wall to stop your opponent from knocking it out. 21 is matching. It's more fun with the Mario card set. You can match Waluigi with Waluigi. The impossible difficulty AI is, well, nearly impossible. You need precognition to beat it. 20 is Texas Hold'em, one of the most popular poker variants. I'm not sure why this completely overtook normal poker. I guess it's a bit more digestible and less luck-oriented. It can be addictive once you start winning round after round. A lot of the casino card games have a betting mechanic, so you have to juggle that along with the actual card game at hand. We're in the teens now, getting serious. 19 is Blackjack, the classic struggle between risk and reward. Less strategy than Texas Hold'em, but it's fast-paced and getting an actual blackjack is an amazing feeling. It's a game you can pick up and play and then just tap out. 18 is Sevens. Here you have a row of 4 sevens, and you need to count up or count down by placing cards next to it. Easy to play, but there is quite a bit of strategy because you can easily lose if you don't plan out your moves or get rid of the right cards at the right time. 17 is Hex. There's a board filled with hexagons, and you are trying to make a non-broken path from one side to the other, while your opponent is also trying to do the same thing. A ton of mind games here, as you could really mess up or get messed up yourself if you don't trick your opponent. It's a great 2-player game that anyone can play. 16 is 4 in a row, aka Connect 4. Again, this game is aimed at 5-year-olds, but hey, it's fun. Another great 2-player game that relies on mind games and trickery. The AI is also incredibly difficult here. You need to break out some algorithms to beat the highest tier. 15 is Yacht Dice, aka Yahtzee. It has a good mix of luck, strategy, and decision making. The dice bouncing around the cup is a great sound. They totally nailed that part. Moving on to 14, Chess. Now, it's risky to put it here because how dare I say a dozen other board games are better than chess, which has been around for 1,000 years. But I like chess. I think all of us have had a chess phase in our life at one point in time. Clubhouse Games actually has a very in-depth tutorial about how to play chess and even some advice regarding strategies. It's much more detail-oriented than the explanations in the other games for this collection. I'm sure there are much better games solely dedicated to chess, but as one of 50 titles, it's a great inclusion. Clubhouse Games is $40, so that means that each game is technically less than $1, and I'm not sure if there's a sub $1 chess game on the Switch. 13 is Gomoku. Plays 5 tiles of your color in a row. It's on a Go board, so there's a lot of space to maneuver around. Think of it as Super Tic-Tac-Toe. Another great 2-player title, and yes, my wife is way better than I am at Gomoku. 12 is Hit and Blow, which is kind of a more simplistic version of Battleship. You have a column of 5 items, and you have to guess what design is in what position. You can even adjust the options where the same pattern appears more than once for a harder challenge. Of course, you want to try to get it in one shot. Wait, is this just Wordle? I think it's just Wordle. 11, Air Hockey. This is a game that is obviously more fun to play in real life, but Clubhouse Games has a solid digital version. There's also no chance of the puck flying up and hitting you in the face, which could happen at any moment in the real thing. 10. We're here, the top 10 of Clubhouse Games, the elite of the elite. 10 is Billiards. There are a couple of games included here, like 8-ball and 9-ball and so on. This isn't any different from what's been done before, but the physics are good and it's fast-paced. You can skip the cue ball bouncing around and just jump right into the next shot. I do wish they had more Nintendo themes to some of these games though, like the cue ball could be Samus and a ball or something. Get spicy. 9 is Toy Baseball. A lot of the other toy games were near the bottom of the list, but baseball is by far the best one. You can actually throw different types of pitches and adjust your batter's location in the box. I have had many heated battles with the AI in this game. It's just pure baseball fun. Number 8, Bowling. We've got Nintendo Switch Sports coming up soon, but until then you can have some fun with Clubhouse Games Bowling. It's got motion controls and everything. 7 is Last Card, aka Uno. Yes, Uno is copyrighted, so they can't use that name, but it's exactly the same game. Not really much to say about it. Uno is a simple pleasure in life. 6 is Golf. Now, this is not like Wii Sports Golf, but instead more in line with the NES golf titles. I'm pretty sure that the courses are exactly the same as the original NES golf game, which is a cool throwback. That game really isn't dated at all. Okay, we got serious before. Now it's even time to get more serious. I'm talking top 5 here. Number 5, Battle Tanks. Team Tanks showed up earlier, but I prefer the non-team version. Tank battles are a great concept in general. It can get way too complicated for sure. I mean, driving a tank is probably hard, but make it simpler while still keeping the unique control mechanics, and you've got something special. There's a great arcade game by Namco called Tokyo Wars. I think Battle Tanks is up there with that great game in terms of fun arcade tanks. Number 4 is Mancala, which originated in Africa. We've got Europe, Asia, Africa, America. Again, it's so great to see all these places represented. I never played or even heard of Mancala before this game, but I quickly got addicted. Each player has pockets where they drop gems, with the goal of having the most gems inside one pocket, which is the designated goal. What's great about this game is that if you have 10 gems in your hand, you drop 1 in each pocket, including the enemies. That sounds strange since it seems like you are just giving the enemy points, but there is a great deal of strategy around it since you can hinder your opponent by messing up how many gems they have in a specific pocket. Once you get how you're supposed to distribute the gems and take advantage of the multi-turn rule, you can really run up the score and do fun things like steal your opponent's gems and whatnot. It definitely made me want to buy the physical board game, but hey, it's way easier just to play digitally. 3. This episode's main event, Hanafuda, aka Koi Koi. If you've never played it, it's a great entry point. Plus, it has Mario-themed Hanafuda cards, which are fun to use. There are Pokemon and Kirby-themed Hanafuda cards in Japan. Why aren't they in the game? I love Clubhouse Games, but I do think they could have given us more fun card designs. Anyways, Koi Koi is such a great game because it's easy to learn, but incredibly unique in how you play it, and like I've said a billion times this episode, it has a good balance of luck and skill. For me, I want a bit of luck to play into games because it keeps it dynamic. I do think the AI is pretty easy though, maybe I'm just that good, who knows. Feel free to 1v1 me in Koi Koi anytime. We're at 2. What's it gonna be? Riichi Mahjong. I played Mahjong before Clubhouse Games, but this was the first time I really got into it. It always seemed way too complicated, way too difficult, but it's really not. Just think of it as Super Poker. The game revolves around making hands and sets. Once you understand the basic sets you can make, you'll have a ton of fun. This is easily my most played game on Clubhouse Games in terms of pure hours I put into it. After I got into Mahjong through Clubhouse Games, I also got into Mahjong Souls, and now I'm constantly on the hunt for a new Mahjong title. I'm surprised there isn't a Nintendo-themed one, but it does have a reputation of being associated with gambling, so I can see why Nintendo wouldn't want to make their own Mario Mahjong, for example. And number 1, the best game in the collection is President, also known as Daifugo in Japanese. This is a card game from Japan that uses the typical 52 card deck. You are trying to get rid of your cards, but you can only play cards stronger than the one placed down. But there are fun special cards like 8, wiping the board clean, and the ability to reverse the power of cards. The real appeal is that it's played in rounds, and there are rankings for each round. If you get rid of all your cards first, you become the Daifugo, the rich man. Last placed is Daihinmin, the poor man. At the start of the next round, the loser has to give the 2 strongest cards to the winner, and the winner gives their 2 weakest cards to the loser. You can also do variations on this based on how many people you have, like second place and third place swap a card. It may seem unfair that the winner gets stronger, but that's also part of the fun. If the winner doesn't get first place in the next round, they automatically lose and become the Daihinmin. So there is an awesome flow of being on top, then being on the bottom, and it's a great feeling to be in last place only to topple the Daifugo. If you're on top, you have an incredible advantage, but you could lose it all if you aren't careful. So you can go from God mode to 0 HP. So that's my Clubhouse Games ranking. I won't go through all of them again, but as a summary, top 5, President, Mahjong, Hanafuda, Mancala, Battle Tanks. Bottom 5, Shooting Gallery, Ludo, Backgammon, 9 Min S'mores, and Hare and Hounds. The rest are in there somewhere. Play Clubhouse Games and make your own ranking. Clubhouse Games is a very relaxing, lighthearted title. The opposite end of that is, of course, Elden Ring. I talked about it a few episodes ago, but now that I'm at the final boss, I can give some final thoughts on the massive title from Tokyo's own From Software. I suppose there will be spoilers for some locations, but I'll stay away from story elements. Honestly, even if I said what's happening in the final boss battle, someone who isn't as far as me will just think, what? My overall thoughts on the game hasn't changed much. It's an incredible achievement in my favorite Souls game yet. From has given us something different, something unique in the open world genre, and it's pretty incredible that they managed to shift the very controlled Souls experience into something that is far more freeing. That said, as you go along the game, you definitely see some of the tricks they reuse, some of the cracks in the game. There's a journey from, this is a completely realized world, to, oh, this is an open world video game. Is Limgrave the best part of the game? I think you could have a strong argument for it. I wonder if in general, open world games are stronger from the offset because everything is brand new and awe-inspiring. But I think most open world games start off somewhat limited and then open up later on. Witcher 3 with White Orchard, a lot of Assassin's Creed start you off in some tutorial area first. Breath of the Wild also does this with the plateau. So Elden Ring throwing you right into the middle of everything is pretty unique in a way. You are overtaken by how many dangerous and unique elements you encounter the second you step out of the church. There's a horse knight you can't damage, running to a lake summons a dragon, there's a chest that you can open that warps you to a completely different part of the map. These types of events are so bewildering and amazing, but as the game goes along, it's not shy about reusing them. Oh, it's another horse knight. Oh, more dragons. Oh, teleporting is basically a major gameplay mechanic. This is completely understandable though. Of course they would reuse assets, locations, and events. Why make it if you're just going to use it only once? But things become less distinct and you start to see through the curtain a little bit. When you first encounter a catacomb, you're like, whoa, I found this huge maze with distinct enemies and items in this random cave. But like many open world games, it's just one of the overworld things that are repeated. If this was a Ubisoft game, the catacombs would have a unique icon on the map. From cleverly hides this and doesn't litter your map with icons, but they do utilize a lot of concepts you have seen in many open world games. Catacombs, mining caves, hero graves, etc. are all scattered around in order to give you specific items. The walking mausoleums are a mind-blowing sight the first time you encounter it, but then you realize, oh, it's just a mechanic to duplicate remembrances. A lot of the mechanics and encounters in Limgrave are replicated throughout the world. You could argue you encounter more incredible, memorable events in Limgrave than most open-world games. The journey from the church to Stormvale Castle, and then your assault on the castle, is incredibly exciting and challenging. Even the side stuff, like the Weeping Peninsula, finding the sorceress Selin in the ruins, exploring the Mistwoods, and finding secret passages to an underground civilization, these are things I'm not going to forget easily. You could probably make a really amazing 20-hour game solely using Limgrave as the entire map, but for Elden Ring, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Even though From reuses ideas, I can't think of another open world game with this much diversity in terms of enemies and combat encounters. Up until the end of the game, I was constantly bumping into creatures and horrors I've never seen before. And what's amazing is that From probably had to cut out a lot of ideas from this game, which seems absurd since it feels like they shoved everything into here. Beyond Limgrave, the other areas are also very strong. The hellish Caelid, which is a living nightmare that people fear to tread upon, does become more manageable as the game goes along. And yes, a lot of its sights will be burned into your brain for eternity. I was suddenly warped to the Beastman's temple, and as I was riding back to Limgrave, I thought I was truly going insane because of all the bizarre things I encountered. I've seen a lot of sweeping grasslands in open world games, but I've never seen something like Caelid. The Atlas Plateau is another visually overwhelming locale to explore, filled with secrets like the ominous Volcano Manor and the Royal Capital, which may be the biggest, most complex legacy dungeon yet. I do think the term legacy dungeon is sort of a funny phrase. I mean, Souls is only about 10 years old, but I guess it does have quite the legacy, right? And man, the whole underground. While it's nowhere near as big as it looks, it's absolutely awe-inspiring in terms of art design. I like the concept of having these Greek and Roman-inspired palaces underground with medieval European structures on the surface. One of Elden Ring's strongest points is how it manages to balance exploring small caves and these huge labyrinthian dungeons. If it was just legacy dungeon after legacy dungeon, it would be pretty exhausting. If there were a million caves, you would grow tired of them too. But the world isn't flooded with unnecessary things. A section might have a cave, then a fortress, which is kind of a more complex area, then a story-focused legacy dungeon. Letting the player explore these at their own pace, or doing them in whatever order, helps the pacing of the game and gets the player excited to move on to the next challenge. Sometimes I didn't feel like making progress in some giant dungeon. I wanted to explore a smaller area for maybe 15 to 20 minutes and get some reward or progress on a side quest. And even though they reuse a lot of concepts, it still didn't feel like every catacomb was the same, or that every fort was the same. They all had something distinct about them, even if they fell under the same umbrella. This is something you didn't see in Dark Souls. Yes, some areas were smaller than others, but it forced players to engage with them at a specific time instead of letting players decide what type of journey they want to undertake. The quality of the game in general and the locales do get weaker once you move past the capital. Areas get much more linear with more frustrating boss fights. Even normal enemies can decimate you, even if you didn't have too much trouble with the capital. Elden Ring typically does a great job in making you feel powerful thanks to its overworld structure. You can visit places where you are far beyond the recommended level and just decimate. In a lot of Souls games, I always felt that while I was technically getting stronger, it did feel like the game was matching me every step. I didn't feel strong, I just felt I was keeping up. Here you can just wipe out foes in a hit because they are designed for level 30 players and you're level 100. I can indulge in a bit of power fantasy, finally, with Elden Ring. But after the capital, all that kind of goes away. The balance goes completely out of whack in the later portions of the game, as the game shifts from exploring to making you bang your head against the wall to get past a story boss. It almost feels like you're back at square one, as even basic enemies can turn your health bar to yellow instantly. There are so many brutally tough bosses in this portion of the game too. It was strange because some bosses in this section I managed to defeat in 1 or 2 tries, but something like the Fire Giant had me stuck for days. Same with the final boss. I think I'm not alone in thinking that while the idea is fun, it's such a slog to fight and it brings the game down. I'm sorry to bring it up again, but Breath of the Wild. You had a real battle, then in Phase 2, you had a spectacle battle that was easy but still incredibly impressive visually and had story weight. Elden Ring's final boss has a great first phase, but then everything you don't want in a boss fight is crammed into the second part. It would have been better if they just gave the first phase more health and had the second phase be just incredibly easy but still visually awe-inspiring, or at least put in a grace between the two phases. I know the final boss should be the hardest, but not because of the reasons Elden Ring's final boss is difficult. Favorite moments? I really enjoyed the whole Volcano Manor questline. The character stories, the dungeon, the boss fight, everything wrapped up in a memorable and satisfying conclusion. Raya is definitely one of the best NPCs in the game. I also love the Radahn boss fight. It has a very fun gimmick that makes it feel like a MMO raid. I don't think anyone expected Radahn to be that big. I beat him post-patch, so I'm curious about how tough he actually was. I beat him just after a handful of tries, so I wonder if it would have been a smooth pre-patch. Great music in that area too. Ronnie's quest was also fantastic. One of the greatest things about Souls quest lines is that you truly have zero idea where they will end up. They start off so subtly, so benignly, but at the end you are involved in some truly insane situations. Okay, here's a castle with creepy hands. Let me get past this and, oh, I found a witch's home, and now she's sending me on a quest. A quest that involves teaming up with a wolfman, a giant, and a sorcerer as we go kill a demigod, then explore an underground city for treasure. It ends with you fighting one of the craziest looking things in the game, and that's saying something for Elden Ring. The Volcano Manor quest that ends with you fighting a giant snake god also starts off with you getting a necklace back from a thief. Talk about escalation. A lot of people have incredibly depressing side quest conclusions, and some have happy ones, but there's always a "and then she horribly died" road that you could accidentally take. Oftentimes talking to the player is the worst thing they could have possibly done. "Gee, sorry, I was just wondering what you were doing over here. I didn't know we would fight to the death later on." One improvement I'd like to see regarding NPCs, a quest log. It's time. They did eventually patch in character locations on the map, but that only helps if you sort of know who you're looking for and where. A lot of Souls NPC quests involve multiple NPCs, so I can see how it can get confusing and progressing someone's quest too far or not far enough can just mess everything up. Please, just give me a little journal that says, "So-and-so is currently here and wants X." Even though Souls games are still brutally hard, From has been adding notable quality of life improvements. I remember people flipped out because Dark Souls 2 let you freely warp, while in Dark Souls 1, you couldn't fast travel until halfway through the game and only to specific points. But now no one is complaining about fast travel in Elden Ring. Perhaps my biggest criticism of the game revolves around it being a stat-focused RPG and having items tied to that. You might be thinking, what are you talking about? That's the core of Souls. Which is true, but Sekiro didn't do it. Also, ask yourself this. What percentage of things you picked up in the open world were worth collecting? Is it 10%? 1%? I think it's closer to the last one. For me, upgrade mats and key items were worthwhile. Everything else, not so much. There's a lot of weapons, armor, and crafting material, but since the game is so tied into your stats, you can't use most of it, or at least not effectively. To succeed at these games, you really need to shape your character around a build where everything you use complements it. It's not very experimentation friendly unless you constantly respec. As someone who was melee focused, I have no need for spells. If they didn't have a stat requirement, I might have tried some out, but otherwise they were completely useless. When you have an open world game that is focused on player exploration, the player wants to feel that it's worthwhile to go to these places. It is in many ways, but often not in terms of making your character stronger. Everyone has different builds, so From needs to cater to every possible combination, but that often leaves people twiddling their thumbs after they've cleared out a cave or secret area because they got a giant hammer when they're a mage or an incantation when they're a rogue character. Maybe getting rid of stat requirements for items or not focusing on stats at all and just equipment builds would better suit an open world game as opposed to the typical Souls series, which are more dungeon crawlers. Maybe you could still level up, but it would be more of a generic stat boost, where most of your stats and abilities are tied around what you've got equipped. I also think that having so many upgrade tiers for weapons makes players hesitant to switch from it. If you've got a +9 sword, why even try an axe that's not upgraded at all? As you move towards the end of the game, you get easier access to upgrade materials, but at that point you've spent dozens of hours with the same weapon. If you want to keep these Souls-style stats, get rid of stat requirements and weapon upgrades. Have items you find in the world be more distinct and more straight upgrades, but still give people options to change affinities or scalings to match their character build. I think this would complement the open world structure in the game, so players will always be finding things they can immediately use or experiment with. Something in between Sekiro and Souls. I am incredibly curious about what From does next. The hardcore fans are up for everything, but Elden Ring also managed to nab a lot of new people. I'm sure Namco is shouting, "Please, Elden Ring 2" at From, but do they really want to make that? Will they ever return to a more controlled experience like in the previous games? I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they made something more linear, something more in line with Sekiro, and then put out another Elden Ring in maybe 5 years or so. I think they can be very experimental with their next title. They always have that Elden Ring 2 card in their back pocket, so get crazy now. Cookies and cream, please. I don't think it's perfect, and it's not my favorite open world game, but I had a complete blast playing Elden Ring. In terms of Game of the Year 2022, if it falls out of my top 5, I'll be pretty surprised. If you've never played a Souls game, this is probably the best launching point into that series. If you didn't like past Souls games, I still don't think you will like Elden Ring. It really is just big Dark Souls, or maybe Dark Souls 4, 5, and maybe even 6 jammed together. For me though, it's easily one of the best open world games I've ever played. It ironically brings a lot of new things to the genre by taking things from a non-open world game. Hopefully developers look at this game and look at Breath of the Wild and think, oh, that's what people want from this genre. Fun games all around. Time for some news. Alright, a lot of news this week, and most of it is good. We all needed something after that Zelda delay. I'm still bruised, still hurt. But Nintendo gave us some ointment by undelaying a game. Xenoblade 3 has been moved up from September to July 29th. This is not the first time Nintendo has done this. Back in the Wii U days, they moved the Mario Kart 8 DLC up a month. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot going on back then, so a goodwill move like that made sense. Here, it's pretty surprising that they would suddenly move a game up 6 weeks or so after giving it a date only 2 months ago. The announcement was accompanied by a new trailer. It certainly looks like Xenoblade. I'm not an expert on the series, so I don't have a whole lot of other thoughts, but Xenoblade Hardcore seemed to like it. It has a big level 99 monkey in the opening area, so there was much rejoicing. July is actually a pretty loaded month for the Switch. We have Live Alive releasing 1 week before Xenoblade 3 now. Seems weird for Nintendo to move their big JRPG up next to that, considering Live Alive is at least for now exclusive to the Switch. The Clona ports are also coming in July, so those 3 games alone give you plenty to play. I've seen some people speculate that since Nintendo moved Xenoblade up, maybe something is getting pushed back. I don't think there's a lot of truth to that. First of all, Advance Wars already got pushed back. Maybe they are moving Advance Wars to September and moving Xenoblade up. Maybe Nintendo has other big titles in September that we don't know about yet. Let's look at a possible Nintendo Switch first-party calendar for the rest of the year. April will have Nintendo Switch Sports. May currently has nothing, but there has been speculation of a casual game suddenly being announced and then releasing soon after. Journalist Emily Rogers noted that a sequel to 1-2 Switch may be on the way, called Everybody's 1-2 Switch. Supposedly it is more similar to Jackbox. Again, this could just turn out to be nothing, but a casual game coming in May seems possible. June is Mario Strikers. July is now Xenoblade 3. August could be Splatoon. September, maybe Advance Wars and Mario Rabbids. We really haven't heard anything about Mario Rabbids, which makes me wonder if that could get delayed, but a showcase at E3 and then a release date 3 months later seems pretty probable. October, Halloween, witches, come on, why not Bayonetta 3? I've mentioned before on the podcast, but Intelligent Systems has released at least one game on Nintendo hardware every year for decades. This year very well could be a Fire Emblem year, so a new Intelligent Systems Fire Emblem in October would make a lot of sense. It also now has some distance from Xenoblade. November is Pokemon. December is kind of a free space, maybe another casual game, or Zelda ports, or the Metroid Prime remaster. There's a lot of things they could shove out there before the Christmas rush. And this is just the announced games. Who knows what Nintendo could announce between now and the end of the year? There is that heavily rumored Donkey Kong game from an EPD team. That could hit this holiday. Unlike most years, we know a ton about upcoming Nintendo games, so it is fun to try to plug them into a calendar. Either way, Nintendo has an absurd amount of exciting first-party titles this year. Land. Nintendo bought some. Nintendo has purchased the land currently surrounding their Kyoto headquarters for about $40 million, or about 5 billion yen. The yen number sounds way more impressive. Nintendo previously announced that they were expanding their office and making another building right next to their current HQ, so why not buy the land you plan to build it on? Like their SRD acquisition, this is one of those important but also kind of unexciting announcements that has been pouring in recently as Nintendo is preparing to expand their game development output. Hard to get excited about it at this moment, but we will see it pay off a few years from now. What is likely to pay off sooner than later is Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games on Switch. Game Boy emulators for Switch were recently leaked online. The Game Boy one is called Hiyoko, which means chick in Japanese, like a baby chick, and the GBA one is called Sloop, both apparently from Nerd, which is Nintendo's internal team that has worked on emulation projects, including Nintendo Switch Online's classic game apps. There's enough info and details in the emulators that make it seem legitimate. A lot of games have been tested on it, but that doesn't mean that these games are coming to Nintendo Switch Online, so don't get your hopes up yet. But it is likely that a lot of them are. Looking at the list, some definitely stick out as oddball picks. Ninja 5-0, Super Robot Tyson, and Tactics Ogre are definitely more obscure titles that pop up here. What was also found in the files is that there may be support for N64's Transfer Pack. This allowed you to transfer Pokemon from your Game Boy games into N64 titles like Pokemon Stadium. A couple of other games also use this, like the Mario Sports titles. A few Japan-only titles also take advantage of it, like Puyo Puyo and Super Robot Wars 64. One of the biggest hurdles for the Game Boy titles coming to NSO is, of course, Pokemon. The series is by far the biggest franchise on the handheld, so if you release it without Pokemon, what are you doing? But Game Freak has been very particular with their ports. Classic Pokemon titles were eventually added to the 3DS, but were at a premium price and did have support for Pokemon Bank. So Game Freak might be uninterested in just allowing a straight port of their old games onto the NSO app, especially with special features like Rewind and custom save states. But maybe Game Freak is working on these titles that allow you to transfer Pokemon from the NSO app to Pokemon Home, but you've got to wonder if that means the GB titles will be only for the expansion pack tier, or if there will be some sort of separated Pokemon app. Either way, Game Boy titles coming to Switch is incredibly exciting. There is a lot of novelty to playing these on a TV, even just a backlit handheld device. There is also a huge disparity between US and Japanese Game Boy titles, with many exclusives never leaving Japan. So I'm curious to see how different the two game selections are. I can see this getting announced during Nintendo's June Direct with a release in the fall. We're probably 6 months or so out, but it is something to look forward to. Let's take a peek at some game merch. Uniqlo, the famous fast fashion brand in Japan, is having a collaboration with Final Fantasy starting in May. Each main Final Fantasy title, 1 through 16, will have their own shirts. You can check them out now, but a lot of them are so-so. I guess it depends on what your favorite Final Fantasy game is, and if the shirt captures the feeling of that title. For me, the standout is the Final Fantasy VI shirt. It has that classic opening scene with the Magitex. I'll nab this one for sure, but the others I might want to see in person before I buy. Also, I need to probably pull back on gaming shirts. A lot of them just become what I wear for a few hours before bed. But if you want to wear gaming merch to bed, Japanese sleepwear brand Gelato Pique has you covered. They are releasing Yoshi-themed pajamas for men and women on April 25th. The fluffy Yoshi hoodies are the biggest item, as it comes with a Yoshi head hood that you can wear over your skull. Does it look like you're wearing the skin of a Yoshi? Kind of. There are also just shirts if you don't want to become one with the Yoshi. Publishers have been rattling off some Switch game announcements these past few days. Sonic Origins is coming June 23rd. This is the classic game collection that includes Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles plus CD. These are actually the Christian Whitehead / Taxman versions, not the ports from M2. The biggest talking point is the weirdly complicated DLC structure. The Standard Edition, which has, the game, Start Dash Pack, which is DLC, Premium Fun Pack, Classic Music Pack, and the Digital Deluxe Edition are also available to purchase. I don't want to break this down because it's fairly absurd, but Sega is selling some music, animations, and difficulties as DLC. To their credit, it's not like Sega is just slapping these 5 games on a cart. There are added features, but do you really need to make a retro game collection so complicated? Give us the games at good quality with some quality of life features and we're good. No one wants to buy main menu animation DLC, I promise. It's priced at $40, which honestly is a little high. These games have been made available so many times, and now there are 4 ways to play Sonic 2 on the Switch. The Genesis Collection, the M2 port, the NSO app, and now Sonic Origins. I have the M2 port and it's great. And that's the best Genesis Sonic game, so I think I'm good. I actually did own a Sonic collection on PS2. Am I going to have to buy a new Sonic collection every 15 years? Stay tuned. Eiyuden Chronicle Rising is coming to Switch on May 10th. This is the prequel and/or spin-off to Eiyuden Chronicle, a Kickstarter-funded game by former Suikoden developers. That game is still a ways off, so this side-scrolling action RPG is here to satiate us in the meantime. I kind of have a weird history with Suikoden. I loved Suikoden 3. I thought that title was absolutely amazing and gripping. I got all 108 characters, did all the post-game stuff, everything. It's probably my favorite PS2 title, and that's saying something considering how many great games are on that platform. I skipped Suikoden 4 due to bad reviews, and I only played a few hours of Suikoden 5. I did get the DS game, Suikoden Tierkris, but I never finished it. So it's hard to call myself a fan of the series since I only connected with that one game, but I love JRPGs and I should probably try out Suikoden 2 and 5 again someday. Speaking of PS2, GrimGrimoire from Vanillaware is coming to Switch on July 28th in Japan. Titled GrimGrimoire OnceMore, it is a remaster of the original PS2 title and will come with new features and quality of life changes. If you haven't played it, GrimGrimoire can be described as a 2D side-scrolling RTS. Yes, that combo of words sounds crazy, so check out a video to get a better feel of the game. The original game got some attention because it was right when Nippon Ichi hit it big with Disgaea, so a lot of people were paying attention to anything they were putting out. Ironically, this game came out about a month or 2 before Odin Sphere, which really put Vanillaware on the map, so a lot of people skipped out on this title. With this and 13 Sentinels, I'm really hoping Vanillaware just opens up the floodgates for their titles on Switch. Give us Odin Sphere. Give us Muramasa. How these titles aren't on Switch yet 5 years in, I'll never know. Bugsnax is coming to Switch on April 28th with free DLC. This was one of the first PS5 titles announced, and for me, it was definitely the highlight of that presentation. I thought, well, I'm totally buying this after I saw it, but when I finally got my PS5, I skipped it. Sorry. Impressions were not as glowing as I would have liked, but maybe it is more digestible on the Switch. Digestible, snacks, the bugs are food. Okay, moving on. It wouldn't be a news rundown without Pokemon. May's Pokemon TCG set for Japan has been announced, Dark Phantasma. This set focuses on dark and spooky Pokemon like Hisui and Zoroark, who will get V and V-Star cards. Kagayaku Pokemon are also coming back. I think the English term for this is Radiant. These shiny cards debuted previously, and there will be a new Radiant Gardevoir. I'm a pretty casual collector, so unless the set has something I really want or has some interesting theme, I can easily skip them. I think I might sit Dark Phantasma out. I should probably be saving all my card money for the Gen 9 cards that would definitely hit later this year. But if you're hyped for Dark Phantasma, the set is hitting stores in Japan on May 13th. Some Tokyo news. There's quite a few notable pop-up shops happening in the city. There are Kirby pop-up shops in both Ikebukuro and Harajuku selling Kirby 30th anniversary goods. I stopped by the Ikebukuro shop and put pictures on my Twitter and Instagram, so check them out there. The Ikebukuro shop is in the south exit of Ikebukuro Station, and it's hard to miss considering all the pink. I finally got to see the Kirby block tables in person. The shop is mostly old Kirby merch, with the 30th anniversary goods off in its own little section. Maybe the biggest 30th anniversary good is a giant retro Kirby plush, but sadly they didn't sell it here. They did sell mini retro Waddle Dee and Kirby plushies though. I got a cool sticker of retro Kirby, but again, I have no idea where to put these stickers. My laptop, a folder, the wall. Stickers are supposed to be temporary, but this one looks too cool to use. I also picked up a mug and a tea ceremony blind box. I got Meta Knight holding some dango, so no complaints. The Harajuku shop is supposedly smaller and only has 30th anniversary goods, so I might skip out on that one. The Ikebukuro shop closes on the 27th, so go now. There will also be a Mother/Earthbound shop at the Shinjuku Sumitomo building from April 29th to May 4th, so during Golden Week. It's called Mother no Departo, or Mother's Department Store. It will sell new Earthbound goods, including some Mother 3 plushies and a plushie box set of the 4 playable characters from Earthbound. The box set is about $100, but they do look cute. Hobonichi has been showing off some new merch every day via Twitter. I went to a Mother exhibit in 2020, and they certainly had a ton of great merch, so I want to go again. However, I checked the times and, they're all reserved. Not a single spot is open. Very valuable lesson for those living in or visiting Japan. If you want to do something, reserve day 1. Second one, if possible. I can't check it out, but I'll be sure to at least retweet those who do. What better way to wrap up than with some Japanese software and hardware sales? Kirby is still dominating the charts and has sold 550,000 units physically in Japan. It should see quite a bump during Golden Week, but Nintendo is also releasing Switch Sports at that time, so the new title could eat into Kirby's momentum. Breath of the Wild also has likely passed 2 million physical units at this point, which is an incredible achievement. The series has historically not been huge in Japan compared to a lot of other Nintendo franchises, but Breath of the Wild managed to connect with, everyone. Switch sold 60,000 last week, a bit down from the previous week, and definitely down from last year, which was still riding a Monster Hunter high. Honestly, not a whole lot to discuss here. Kirby is still doing well, and Switch is still coasting. We should have more fun things to talk about once those Golden Week numbers pour in. I wonder if Nintendo Switch Sports will have the legs of something like Ring Fit Adventure. It might not have a huge opening, but we'll see how it performs week in and week out throughout 2022. A bit of worldwide sales news. Shin Megami Tensei 5 has sold 1 million copies worldwide, which makes it the best-selling Shin Megami Tensei title. It's been heavily rumored to come to other platforms soon, so that number will only go up. It was actually the very first game I talked about on this podcast, so check out episode 1 for my thoughts. There's some good stuff in those old episodes, you know. Let's move on to the Japanese gaming phrase of the week. This episode's phrase is urawaza. Urawaza. It literally means trick, specifically secret trick, something underhanded, something a bit unknown. As you can guess, this refers to cheats, tricks, or glitches you encounter in a game. Kids these days really don't know about cheat codes at all. When I played F-Zero X recently and used the Unlock Everything cheat, I definitely felt nostalgic. When I rented fighting games, I would always try to look up if there was something I could get with the code. Once again, urawaza. Now for the Japanese tweet of the week. I've chosen one from artist at Pokeyugami. It's a recreation of the classic Pokemon Gen 1 art of red, blue, and green with their starter Pokemon. But this time, it's Gen 9 characters and monsters. It looks so authentic, and the classic Sugimori watercolor style always looks amazing. Though at that time, he was really just ripping off Akira Toriyama, something that he readily admits. It's something you don't notice until you look for it, but then you can't unsee it. Either way, check out the tweet in the description. Time's up. Thanks as always for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your favorite app. This podcast is also available on YouTube, so like and subscribe there as well. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Just search for Tokyo Game Life or find the links in the podcast description. If you like the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends and on social media. If there's anything you want me to talk about or cover, don't be shy, just message me on Twitter. I'll try to make it happen. The next episode will be Sunday, May 8th. See you next time. Mata ne!